On today's show, you're going to meet a diplomat from South Africa. Hello, I'm Shannon Skinner, and this is Extraordinary Women TV. My first guest today is Tselane Mokuena. She is the Consul General for South Africa, based here in Toronto, and she's going to be talking about her success story. Now, later in the segment, before we take a break, I'll have my regular Good to Know Minute when I ask my guests for their top success tip. You'll hear Tselane's. In the second half of the show, we'll be talking about getting rich by 30. So stay with us. Tselane Mokuena, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Shannon.
Now, you are the South African Consul General based in Canada, based here in Toronto. That's really quite a handle, Consul General. Now, let's start with, what is the role of a Consul General?
The Office of a Consul General handles a number of responsibilities on behalf of South African government or any other government that assigns a diplomat to handle the role of Consul General. In particular, we are responsible for ensuring smoother trade and investment between South Africa and Canada. We're responsible for ensuring that South African goods find their way into the Canadian market, and that our products are bought, that our products are known, and that we establish economic linkages between Canada and South Africa. Now we have a number of companies from Canada that are investing in South Africa, in the likes of Bombardier, SNC-Lavalin, taking advantage of construction and the building of trains and so forth. And we also have mining companies from Canada investing in South Africa in a very good way. In reverse, we also have South African companies investing in Canada, and we are actually in a net export position to Canada, believe you me.
So why is it relations between Canada and South Africa so important?
It's very critical for two countries to have good relations between each other, for smoother flow of trade, for smoother flow of investments, for easier movement of people and goods, because without smooth relations there will be a hindrance in terms of all that. Investment flows of shares, flows of trade, goods, services, flow of movement. There would not be easier distribution or issuance of visas if the relations were not good between South Africa and Canada. There would not be an easier movement of people in terms of tourism.
Tourism is really important, is it?
Yeah.
It's my understanding is it's certainly one of the biggest industries for many countries around the world. Tourism.
It has grown actually in the last 3 years between South Africa and Canada, starting to boom clearly around the 2010 World Cup. I don't know if you had opportunity to watch that, Shannon, but Canada has been one of the fastest growing countries in terms of tourism supply to South Africa after the 2010 World Cup. While other countries remained steady, Canadian tourism has been lifting up across the board.
Now, you began your career as a lawyer. You studied law.
I studied law, but I've never practiced as a lawyer. I've always worked in the administration, in government as a public servant. I've worked in the province of Free State as an advisor in the Office of the Director General in Intergovernmental and International Relations. Also working in the Office of the Premier at that time, in that capacity, Intergovernmental International Relations. I've also worked for the Electoral Commission as head of international relations. So I've not really practiced, but I've worked in public service responsibilities. And I moved to join the Department of International Relations in 2000, to be exact. and that was in the region of Southern Africa, responsible for the Chief Directorate of Southern Africa.
Now you were in a position, there's 50 million people living in South Africa, and as a woman in quite a powerful position as representing South Africa as a Consul General. Did you have any role models or mentors that helped you get to where you are today? I mean, that's quite remarkable. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. Yes, we are a population of about 50 million people. Very big, of course, compared to Canada. And yeah, very diverse, but very exciting community of South Africans, because we've come a long way. We have had to use role models at various stages of our lives. And I don't believe in the concept of one role model, because in my life I've had different role models at various stages of my life, starting off with my mother.
Your mother?
Who was very strong, and she could never let anything go without a challenge. She never got defeated when she started a battle. Not that she was a fighting type, but she could never let go of anything that she believed strongly in. She would always make sure to win. And she instilled that in all of us girls. There are 3 girls in my home, my 2 sisters and myself. And of course I've had role models in the development of my career. At the beginning of my career, I was working in the provincial government of Free State, and I had this remarkable, wonderful supervisor of mine, Miss Keller, very beautiful woman, but also not just beautiful as in facial appearance, but also at heart, taking me through the rounds, helping me to learn how to manage, but also teaching me the work ethic, and being able to show me how to get out there as a woman and achieve. But in that whole environment, showing me how to also achieve while I also give respect to other women, because that can also be a problem when you climb the ladder but do not recognize that you have to climb with the rest of the women. So she has instilled that in me, and I really appreciate that from her. But I've also had role models in my current environment, in the diplomatic environment. My government has been very forward-looking in appointing women in these positions. In fact, South Africa could be among the leading countries in the appointment of women in the diplomatic environment. We could be at the level of 50%. Representation throughout the world, and I've had women mentoring me, ambassadors who were women ambassadors, women high commissioners who entered the diplomatic service in 1994 when we attained our freedom. When Mandela became president, he appointed a lot of women to go out there and show the world that even women can lead in strategic positions. So I've had the opportunity of mixing and mingling with those women, and I've drawn from their strength. I've been nourished by their knowledge, and they've given me a lot of respect, and I've known how to respect other women back from what I got from them.
Did you have a chance to meet Nelson Mandela?
Shannon, yes, I've been in the same room with him, but no, I've not had tea with him. I have had opportunity to shake his hand, and he has locked eyes with me, so that was a beautiful moment. I met him first time when he came out of prison and he was fundraising for the ANC. He came to Philadelphia, where I used to live, in the United States. And I also met him at my church in South Africa. That was the second close encounter that I had with him. But yes, tea, no, unfortunately.
Now, what would we think of, or at least certainly when I think of women entrepreneurs in Canada, I have an idea in my mind what a woman entrepreneur is here in this culture. In South Africa, and considering now you've lived in both nations, what are the similarities of women entrepreneurs in South Africa with Canadian women entrepreneurs? I mean, what would be the number one thing that comes to mind that you would say is similar in how we operate in business?
Yeah, but you know, I think we should start off by acknowledging that we come from two different worlds and of course two different backgrounds and histories. And therefore, I would start off looking at perhaps the differences before I can also engage the similarities. Number one, Canadian women have had the opportunity of formal, highly formalized education in the business and entrepreneurship environment. They have had the opportunity of learning how to manage businesses. They've had mentors in the sector of business that have taught them how to deal with the different challenges of the male-dominated business environment. I would start off there. Different to South Africa, where yes, we are beginning to have a good number of women that are trained in entrepreneurship, that are engaging in businesses, women that are now becoming chairpersons of institutions. They are becoming CEOs of institutions, in line with the whole recognition of our government to women, to ensure that women get into positions that used to historically be assigned to men. There is a strengthening of women in that aspect. However, there are also a vast number of women that cannot be compared at all to Canadian women that are in smaller businesses, who do not have the requisite skills, who need to be mentored and do not quite have enough of those, who need access to credit and do not quite have the background and the requisite support to access credit. Access to finance, which is, I suppose, also a challenge to women in Canada. I wouldn't know if that is exactly the problem, but I think in terms of similarities, both country women would face issues around a clash of responsibilities in terms of being in business versus home and domestic imperatives.
Right.
We are required to excel in the roles that we take as women,
right. Yeah.
As CEOs, as chairpersons of institutions, but also as mothers, as wives, as sisters, and as daughters. So the conflict in those roles, I would think it's quite similar in both cultures.
Now, Tselane, we just have to take a quick break before we do, and we'll pick it up after the break. And before we take the break, it's my good to know minute. And I know you've got a great success tip, so jump right in there.
My quick success tip: lift as you climb. I have had the success and opportunity of being mentored. I have been around very powerful women, starting from my time at Bryn Mawr College in Philadelphia, which is an all-women college, where I was surrounded by smart, intellectual women, and I learned the art of supporting and lifting as I climb. I can never be successful if the young women are not as successful as I am.
Well, that's good to know. Thank you for that. Lift as you climb. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more with Tselane Mokuena, South African Consul General here in Toronto. So stay where you are. Welcome back to the show. I'm Shannon Skinner, and I'm speaking with Tselane Mokuena. She is the South African Consul General based here in Toronto. We're talking about similarities and differences between women entrepreneurs in Canada and South Africa. Credit, financing and credit and access to it seems to be, it's an issue for women here as well, and as you said, in South Africa. That if we could just turn our attention to the issue of poverty for a moment and women in poverty in South Africa, in your mind, in your opinion, what is the answer to helping women get out of poverty in South Africa?
Historically, African women have been known to be very strong. They are the ones who would remain at home when the men go to the fields to hoe and to the mines to seek economic livelihood for their children and for their homes. But women have had to struggle through that, but have had to find ways of survival. Government has recognized the value of empowering women through entrepreneurship. The government, through the Department of Trade and Industry, has introduced various schemes, one of them being the Ntsika scheme, which encourages women to come in for skills development, training, information and research, business linkages. So if they do engage in business, will they be able to find partners both domestically and abroad? So the government helps them through the Ntsika program. But also the government helps through a program called Khula Enterprises, which helps women to find loans. It credits the women with loans. Historically, we know women have a problem finding loans. They have a problem finding the requisite finances to finance their businesses. Also, the credit is very difficult. So Khula makes loans easily accessible to women. We know that it's easier to find, say, microloans, but it's difficult to find loans for small businesses. It's also difficult to find loans for medium businesses and also macro businesses, right?
Right, yeah.
So, but it's been easier to find loans for micro businesses. Women sometimes finance from their own pocket, but government has taken a step further,
right,
and also ensured that companies that employ women in certain numbers and also in certain positions in South Africa do receive favored procurement. Right? If you can demonstrate you have a certain number of women in certain positions, and you apply for a government tender, then you are able to be prioritized. You are prioritized as a company. And that has encouraged companies to recognize the value of women, not just have them in there as tokens to show that they are in compliance, but women are actually engaged in meaningful roles of decision making in various companies in South Africa.
As for women who are businesswomen in South Africa, what is the top industry that you find the majority of women in and where they're really succeeding? Is there, one that...
the women in South Africa at various stages or degrees are in various different environments of business. The most common being the service industry. Service industry. Mm-hmm. You also have a good number of them being in the financing industry, in the banks. You have them in the retail industry. You have very few in the manufacturing industry. You have very few in the mining industry, which is, the cornerstone of our economy, and we need to get more and more interested in that aspect of the economy.
It's interesting. What about the idea of micro franchising, which is a new concept, and one of my previous guests it's something that she's been really shepherding in South Africa.
Oh yeah, I've had opportunity to sit and talk to Martha.
Martha Deacon,
Martha Deacon, and she's almost our heroine in that. She has collaborated with the Department of Trade and Industry to shepherd the whole idea of micro franchising, because traditionally we are more used to bigger franchises, macro franchises,
like McDonald's, yeah.
like KFC,
right.
and Burger King and so forth, right? They are even there in South Africa. So what Martha and the Trade and Industry Department are beginning to do is to introduce micro-franchising. If I can buy, if a young woman or a woman within a small medium enterprise can buy a micro-franchise for $10,000, why pay $100,000 if you can buy it for $10,000? So yeah. Martha, in the last 4 months, has introduced about 4 very practical and visible micro projects which women and younger men and so on have been able to buy into. I'm not able to name them, but I'm aware of them, and I think it's a concept that works. And she has received a lot of support from within South Africa and Canada through the Townships Project. She has been able to receive support from the IDC, International Industrial Development Corporation, from DTI, Trade and Industry, from Social Development, because these are the institutions that recognize the value of ensuring that there's a good spread of opportunities, not only for women, but also for young people. South Africa, we have a very high unemployment rate, which we are trying to curb, and these programs are very critical for that.
Well, Tselane, we're almost out of time, but is there a message, something that we haven't touched on that you would like to share?
Yes, indeed. South Africa is very well endowed with minerals. We are the #1 world producer of platinum. We are the #1 almost world producer of manganese. We produce 75% of world manganese. We produce 80% of world platinum. I mean, without us, the autocatalytic converters would not happen. The cars would not move. So it's as plain as that. I'd like to invite Canadian women in mining to come into South Africa and look at investment opportunities in mining. We have a lot more of male players in the sector, and I know I've been in the environment of women in mining in Toronto, in the Toronto chapter, and I know that there's a good number of women that can take advantage of that opportunity if they know that it exists, and it does exist. South Africa has been valued in terms of mineral potential by Citigroup at $2.5 trillion. So it's up for takes.
Well, I have enjoyed this time with you, Tselane, and learning about what you do and a little bit more about South Africa and businesswomen in South Africa. And I wish you all the best. And thanks again for coming on to the
Shannon.
show.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate time.
For more information about Tselane Mokuena, you can visit my website at extraordinarywomentv.com, where you'll find this interview and her bio and some more information about her. The second half of the show is coming up. You're going to meet Leslie Scorgie. She is the author of the bestseller Rich by 30. So stay where you are.